Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we talk about what's really going on in the world of Russia and the BRICS. Now, my name is Rhod Mackenzie, and today I want to talk about parallel imports. Now, since 2022, Russia has enjoyed parallel imports. Now, the Russian Ministry of Trade and Industry is now considering extending the current parallel import mechanism until 2026. Roman Cherchikov, who's the Secretary of State and Deputy Minister at the Russian Trade Ministry, said a discussion was held on the potential for increasing parallel imports timescale to fully meet Russia's needs and make sure that the impact on domestic producers was not heavy. Now, the press service of the ministry said that parallel import mechanism was introduced as a temporary measure and will continue to be reviewed on a basis. Now, this mechanism was provided to make sure that materials and components to production enterprises, as well as to provide the Russian consumer with certain goods that they required. Now, parallel imports have become a key tool in adapting the Russian economy to the restrictions of the sanctions imposed, according to Vladimir Selachchev, who's a leading researcher at the Russian Trade Academy. Now, before I continue, I'd like to make an appeal. If you like and enjoy my videos, you can help me fund the channel and my website, scobricksinsight.com, to further develop it. You can do this by making a small donation, which you can do by clicking on the thanks button at the bottom of the video screen. Everybody who donates does get a personal thank you from me, and I'm thanking you now. And do keep the comments coming. Do love to interact with you, reading them and then responding to them. Now, despite the inability to cover the full range of needs, particularly in the field of high technology, the main categories of goods are readily supplied from a variety of sources. Consequently, in 2023, the volume of parallel imports actually reached a level of $40 billion, underscoring their significance for the domestic market. As Anastasia Melnikova, who's a professor at the entrepreneurship and logistics at the Russian Economic University, explained, goods from over 150 different sectors were being imported through parallel imports. Now, the list is updated periodically by the Ministry of Industry and Trade, and it's pretty comprehensive with a wide range of well-known products. And this parallel import market is well sort of established. It's able to meet demands by channeling imports through Turkey, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, etc. I mean, there is a niche demand for lesser known brands that are not readily available, but in general there's not a lot that can't be done through parallel imports. And of course they've had a stimulatory effect on competition in the domestic market. However, it's also strategically important to make sure that in a number of areas such as pharmaceutical and the medical industry, as well as machine tool building, that the local industry is protected and developed. I mean, given the complexity of implementing import substitution programs in these areas, and it's unlikely they can be achieved in a short time frame, they do need sort of protection and development. But over the period of the time, parallel imports have proven to be very effective, and currently its monthly volume has been on a downward trend as import substitution takes hold. I mean, the current figure is now around $2 billion per month, although you should note that at its peak back in 23-24, this amount was 3 times higher at $6 to $7 billion per month. Now, that's closely related to the development of the Russian production of goods that are required, as well as the supply of products that are now made in friendly countries and easily exported to Russia. That said, though, parallel imports have helped the Russian economy in the face of sanctions, but they weren't able to meet all their kind of needs, according to Kirill Lysenko, who's an analyst at the expert agency, which I would certainly recommend, and I'd certainly recommend reading their magazine, which I do. Now, for a number of product categories, the current control measures by unfriendly countries make either parallel imports impossible or very kind of excessive with their associated costs. Now, that's particularly relevant in the so-called dual-use goods, with the way that the US implements what it calls dual use. And then the parallel import mechanism is also associated with the lack of after-sales service from the manufacturer, and that can create problems for technologically complex machines and equipment, which is where import substitution or friendly country purchases come in. Now that's just one of the things that are a problem. Now Russia's actually taken parallel imports as a response to the sanctions, but import substitution has helped, as also exploring alternative options in friendly markets like China, Southeast Asia, are also happening with places like Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia. However, it's also not quite yet to find products of similar quality in sufficient volume in all areas, but it's improving. I mean, we talked about things like imports of equipment and raw materials that enable companies to circumvent production shutdowns and reformat of technology change. I mean, there's undoubtedly a positive factor in the short and medium term for Russia. But however, the ongoing availability of sanctions projects has the effect of reducing the development of domestic production of certain such goods. And that's got to be kind of worked. So parallel imports as a mechanism for the supply of our goods originally covered by copyright is not unique. I mean, this system has been used by countries for a considerable period of time. And the scope of the coverage can range from, specific product groups to a comprehensive list of particular goods, I mean, in the face of sanctions pressure in 2022, that mitigated Russia's basically way of saying, well, hang on a minute, if you're not going to sell it to us, we're going to get it through other means. And today some brands are still difficult to get, but there's not particularly a problem, as you can normally find something in the friendly countries that will certainly be somewhere and meet the demand. I mean, you've got to remember in 2022, foreign companies unilaterally terminated their cooperation with Russia, and they disregarded customer prepayments, their guarantees, and their whole way of doing business. That's why parallel imports was endorsed by the market participants and the government. I mean, why should the Russians now put up with the behaviour of those companies and then adhere to their copyrights and their intellectual property rights? So there's now areas that are now achieving high quality and new niches, and Russian manufacturers are now taking over, and they're now looking at the things that they can't do, and that's primary goods that need substantial investments in research and development. And they come with a significant risk of competition from foreign manufacturers. I mean, for example, the production of professional high-quality sports equipment. Many items are traditionally bought from specific foreign manufacturers who are considered the best in their field. We're talking about skis, we're talking about winter sports equipment, or the precision high equipment, instruments and devices in the fields of medicine and science, microscopes, etc. Now, the production of these products necessitates substantial investment in both time and financial resources. Plus, of course, there's no assurance that the sanctions are not actually going to be lifted by the end of the year, and that the product's not ready for sale and utilisation. So these companies will have lost a lot of production. So that's where Russia's got to look at whether it wants to continue to allow these to be imported. But therefore, narrow niches such as machines, equipment and machinery that are already actively used and regularly require maintenance and repair, that parallel imports needs to be extended. In addition, a number of sectors within the chemical industry need to be looked at. In the near future, geopolitical conditions are unlikely to change dramatically, according to Natalia Kanatseva, who's a professor of economic policy at the State Economic University. And I tend to agree with her. I mean, the complexity of international relations is they may improve relations with between Russia and with the US, but I don't see much happening with Europe. And they might even continue the implementation of secondary sanctions, which could present challenges to the conducting of parallel imports if they particularly attack the Eurasian Economic Union countries like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, etc. Plus the complexity of the payment systems also going to be a substantial implication on the cost of goods and challenge to maintain the stability of supplies through the current channel. So consequently, companies involved in parallel imports need to continue to adapt their logistics processes in response to these developments. But all in all, parallel imports are still necessary, but not as necessary as they were, and they're still continuing. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. And if you want to help me out, click on the thanks button at the bottom of the screen. Thank you.